Okay, so we are in Job 15. It's Eliphaz's first speech in this second round. So this is his second speech altogether. You'll remember Eliphaz in his first speech was the most friendly of the three counselors. He was almost tentative and very gentle and didn't accuse Job of anything. Just was really gave off the impression that he was there to try to comfort Job and help, although he's got, the same faulty worldview as his other two counselor buddies. Um, in this speech, he's going to get a little bit more aggressive, but I think overall he's still holding out hope for Job and trying to be, he characterizes his own words actually as gentle. And so I'm going to take him at his word and read them in a gentle way, as if he's, friendly, um, and not attacking Job. And he's got just, what is it, 30 something verses. So it's not a long speech, 35 verses, not very long. And we'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll make a couple of more remarks about it. So I'm going to read from the ESV. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Are you the first man who was born, or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. Are the comforts of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away, and why do your eyes flash, that you turn your spirit against God and bring such words out of your mouth? What is man that he can be pure, or he who is born of a woman that he can be righteous? Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water. I will show you, hear me, and what I have seen I will declare, what wise men have told without hiding it from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no stranger passed among them. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer will come upon him. He has not believed that he will return out of darkness, and he is marked for the sword. He wanders abroad for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Distress and anguish terrify him. They prevail against him, like a king ready for battle. Because he has stretched out his hand against God and defies the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thickly bossed shield. Because he has covered his face with his fat and gathered fat upon his waist, and has lived in desolate cities and houses that none should inhabit, which were ready to become heaps of ruins. He will not be rich, and his wealth will not endure, nor will his possessions spread over the earth. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will dry up his shoots, and by the breath of his mouth he will depart. Let him not trust in emptiness, deceiving himself, for emptiness will be his payment. It will be paid in full before his time, and his branch will not be green. He will shake off his unripe grape like a vine, and cast off his blossom like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil, and their womb prepares deceit. And then he stops talking. So it's really two main parts of this. He's, the center thing, the thing we want to remember is that he's characterizing his own words in Job 15:11, where he says, are the comforts of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? So he is saying of himself that he is giving the comforts of God, and he's doing it in words that are gently spoken, gently. So this is how he is approaching Job. And he basically says two things. He's got in the first 16 verses, basically, he is going to make the argument that Job's sin, or at least the assertion that Job's sin has led Job to say foolish things, and that Job's stance and his persistence in maintaining this stance that he's taken is leading to the destruction of the fear of God. Not some general idea of the fear of God out there in the world, and not Eliphaz's stance before God, but Job is eroding his own faith and his own standing before God by the stance he's taken. That's what Eliphaz is saying. And he has 2 points in that section. In verses 2 to 6, he basically speaks to Job as one friend to another and says, consider, Job, please consider, you're not speaking like a wise man. Your pain and your sin has influenced your thoughts and now your words, so that now your own words testify against you. So this is part one. And then he says after that no one is pure in God's eyes. So he's obviously responding to Job when Job says he's innocent. And so he says, no one's pure in God's eyes, not even his heavenly servants who God doesn't trust, apparently. And how then, Job, since this is true, how can you claim purity? And so he's doing what all the friends did in the first part of, the first round of argumentation. They misconstrued what Job was saying, and Eliphaz is continuing that. The second part of the chapter is about the life and the fate of the wicked, and it's pretty bleak. And what you want to notice when you're reading that is that Eliphaz is speaking of the wicked in general and not of Job in particular. When you look at the pronouns, you can see that Eliphaz doesn't consider Job to be among the wicked. He's telling Job that he's in danger to go there, but Job is not one of the wicked. He's not completely lost or anything yet. And so Eliphaz's goal is to help Job see the error of his ways, his thoughts, his behavior, so that he can accept his punishment from God or his correction like a wise person and be restored to God. So this is the whole point of this speech, that Job is undermining the fear of the Lord, but Eliphaz is concerned about that, and he wants Job to be restored to God. Job is not acting like a wise person. He needs to start acting like and thinking like a wise person so that he can maintain his fear of the Lord and be restored. Anybody have any thoughts about anything I said there? The summary I just gave?
I guess just the part about in verse 11 where where you say he's claiming to speak gently, deal gently, and you sort of take him at his word. I guess when you look at verse 11 there, he's conflating or associating or equating his gentle dealing with implying that he's bringing the comforts of God and dealing in this gentle way. But like as we know at the end, that he gets refuted on that he's not bringing the comforts of God. And
He's not speaking rightly.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I was say in the next chapter, I think it seems that Job is telling him that they are doing doing the bidding of the wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm a little more skeptical of his gentleness here, and that it's not sincere gentleness, it's affected or it's for effect.
Okay. So yeah, and I guess we would never really know which viewpoint is uh, exactly right. Right.
Mm.
I'm gonna I'm gonna say that the Eliphaz. I think what's going on is Eliphaz actually does believe he's bringing the comforts of God,
Mm.
and so he sincerely thinks he is actually offering comfort.
Right.
And
He cares on some level for Job.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cares for Job. He's offering comfort. He's trying to help him. And he hasn't turned against Job, which Bildad has already turned against Job in the first round of and eventually everybody turns against Job. But at
Mm.
this point, Eliphaz is still kind of on the Job team. You're not a really bad guy, Job. You just hit a hard patch here. I'm going to try to help you out, but you're acting like a fool. You know, let me think sensibly, guy.
Mm.
That kind of thing. Um, and Yeah, but there is a problem, right, in the contemporary church. Well, there's always been a problem, I think, ever since there were ever since there were believers, going all the way back to Adam and Eve. There's a problem of people. I mean, you can just think of in our century, probably in our year. Well, yeah, just the last couple of weeks, right? People claim that they're speaking for God, and they say things which are completely false and misleading and wrong. And so, the most recent example that I can think of is the guy who claimed Jesus told him the rapture was going to be, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. And but you have that type of problem in the Pentecostal church and the charismatic branches of Christianity. Often, there's a church out here in Southern California, the Vineyard, where they got prophets who are on the campus, and the congregation is instructed to bring little notebooks so that when they encounter one of the prophet can give them a word from God and tell them what color car they're supposed to buy, or how much vacation time they're supposed to take off. It's or who they're supposed to marry, or where they're supposed to invest their money. And you're supposed to treat it like it's the word of God. And all these guys are liars. They're self-deluded. Um, so we do have problems like that. Eliphaz is here thinking that he is speaking the actual words of God when he's not, and he doesn't understand the situation, and he is equating and like you said, he's conflating his own thinking with God's thoughts, and that's always a danger, right? Um, I don't know what the voice of the Lord sounds like to you in your head, but the voice of the Lord in my head, if I ever hear it, kind of sounds like my voice. So, you
Mhm.
you want to be really careful. Um,
Yeah, I want to make sure it's not just my idea.
that's right.
I would get in trouble with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Chuck. I'm making
yeah.
light. Yeah.
No, it's a problem. It's a challenge for us. So, yeah, and those of us who are, because we're from different church backgrounds and different understandings of how the Spirit works, and if there are prophets for today and words of God given to the congregation that are apart from the Word of God, the written Word of God, we have different views on that within the Christian church. And but at the end of the day, you have to have a standard, and God says that standard is His written word. So if you think that that guy's a prophet and he gave you a word, you still have to test it against the Word of God. Um, so we all have ultimately the same standard. Um, so all right, anybody else? We ready to move in?
I have a comment, please.
Yeah, sure thing. Go ahead.
Well, a week or so ago, I asked you the question about these friends and Job and their relationship prior to this despair that Job has been going through, and why it wasn't apparent earlier in their relationships that they didn't understand the severe difference in what they call their faith in their God and so forth. And we had a very clear discussion about that, and you clarified that for me. And I thought that was important because I thought, geez, these guys are buddies. These are friends. They care. They love each other. And bang, all of a sudden, everything's destroyed. But you said something tonight. I struggled with this one, Chuck, because you said just a minute ago, you said in verses 1 through 16, Eliphaz is saying that Job's sin has led him to say foolish things. Job is eroding his own faith.
Mhm.
Okay, so as I started reading verse 15, 1 through 16, this is I can be wrong. I accept that. That's why I want to be taught. I want to know what's correct. This is a very accusatory, judgmental section that's with these words coming from Eliphaz, because it's you, and eventually, of course, we know where we've come so far with this study, and they're saying your sin, you. He's hitting them with everything from verse 4 all the way through verse 13. It's just him. He's hitting them. You, your, you. I mean, is that gentle? Is that, maybe I need clarity, but if someone is talking with me, I can't put myself in this place. I can't equate to this, but what I read is it's a very harsh, he's not nice. I don't think that he's being nice. Do you understand what I'm I'm struggling with this. I think you can tell with what I'm saying. I don't see this gentle. I see this as another friend going at it.
Yeah.
If you can clarify this for me, I would appreciate it. But right now, I'm not on Eliphaz's side at all.
Sure.
I'm thinking you're a really judgmental, holier than thou kind of guy with this guy you say is your friend.
Mhm.
Oh, that's all
Yeah.
I have to say. I'm sorry. I just have
No,
to tell you, Chuck. That's all.
No, thank
So-
you.
And I think I can maybe kind of add something or to what Catherine's saying there, because I saw much the same thing, and but I think kind of the framing that Chuck presented does make me reconsider some things. Like in verse 15 and 16, he's saying, "Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water." When I first read that, I thought he was directly talking about Job, saying like, what about, much less you here, this abominable, corrupt man. Like, and then, but it's clear, like, as he goes through and he starts talking about the corrupt and how they're the wicked man and all of the terrible things they'll go through, that he's talking, abstractly about, he's not talking directly about Job, he's talking about wicked men in general, right?
Mhm.
But I think it is still, there's this, just in the same way that he makes this association with, my gentle words are from God. He's making this association or suggestion that, like you said, he's implying that Job is on the road toward this, right? So, I mean, you could say he's doing it as a warning. He's concerned that Job is going down this path, and he wants to warn him. So he's using this strong language.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Maybe Catherine, does that kind of
Yes,
give
it
you a little more?
softens it a little bit.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah. He's not just purely like indicting Job necessarily. He's kind of warning him.
Yeah.
He's kind of talking about humans in general, don't you think?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the excuse me, the mental picture you've got in your head about where where is Job seated? Where is Eliphaz? Is Eliphaz standing above him, across from him, shaking the finger at him? Or is he sitting down in the ash heap next to him with his arm on his shoulders
Hmm.
and saying, "Look, buddy,
Yeah.
you've been saying foolish things, man. You got to stop it."
Yeah.
And I
I was
think
thinking
that's
something along those lines too, that this may be an indication of his actual tone as he's delivering this. That
yeah,
these may be, if you just read them, they appear to be fairly harsh or tough words, but he's perhaps delivering it in a soft, considerate tone.
Yeah, I think
I
that's what's going on, which is why I read it, slowly and tried to put an intonation of kindness. And maybe I'm not a very kind person, doesn't come across well, but um, you know, anyway, I think somebody else was going to say something too. Go ahead. It was one
I
of the
agree with
late.
what that.
Go ahead,
That
Catherine.
makes sense to me now. That makes sense. It was me trying to butt in, but anyway,
Uh,
that makes sense because I have uh, I have lumped in Eliphaz and his dialogue with the other two friends. So I figured they're all off the same branch, and I haven't heard. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I don't want to make a comedy out of this, but I don't want to struggle and have a misconception of what's really being said here. And yeah, I can accept the picture of sitting next to him with his arm around his shoulder and saying, "Listen, dear friend, I need to tell you something, very pointed or whatever." But instead, I feel like this is the third and final one, and they've all done nothing but attack him. So I guess I was feeling a lot of sympathy for Job because here's just another big blow. I appreciate you letting me speak about this, but I need to have the right understanding as well. Thank you.
sure. Yeah. So I think one of the things that's important to realize is that, or to think about, and I know we all know this. So the three guys, they're not saying the right things. God says that at the end, and we already know it because we've read the end and we can see what they're saying, and it's not right. But the fact that it's not right doesn't mean the delivery is awful. It's like the cultist that comes to your door. He might be the nicest, most respectful person, soft-spoken person you'll ever meet, and he's going to give you poison with every word he says. And
Mm,
sometimes the preacher is going to be really offensive, and um, you're going to struggle with trying to separate the truth of what he's saying from the way that it's delivered. And
mm-hmm.
we need to realize that there is no correlation between a person being kind and gentle like Eliphaz and having good intentions, like the Mormon that comes to your door, um, and being actually right. He's he's
Yeah.
still he's still wrong. And so
Mm-hmm.
so so what's happening with Job? Job is getting the wrong message in lots of different styles and voices and emotions,
Yeah.
right? Not just three,
Right.
right? Because we've got three rounds, and their emotions are changing and escalating, and their approach is changing, and so Eliphaz, he's the soft, gentle guy, and Bildad's the loud, bombastic guy, and Zophar is in the middle, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
Job is getting basically the same message in lots of different. Turns out it's going to be eight different presentations of the same message. And that isn't that the way that the world is and the devil works. Oh, if you won't listen to it like
Yeah.
that, I'll give it to you this way.
Mm-hmm.
Try it this
Yeah.
way. Maybe you'll like it, right? And Job's
Yeah.
going to
Mm-hmm.
successfully navigate all of that and reject it every time he hears it. And it doesn't matter what tone of voice, and if it's sugar coated, or if it comes to him as a threat like Bildad, or a hand reached out to say, "Let me help you up, Job," like Eliphaz. Job's going to reject it every time because it's always wrong, you know. But
Mm.
so we want to do that too. We want to recognize the truth of something and not being swayed by the presentation, the packaging. You don't want to
Right.
be.
Very good. Very
Uh,
good. Yes. Thank you.
all right, so let's look at 1 through 6 again. And in this opening part, Eliphaz is in the section where he's going to say Job's sins uh, have led to his words and his behavior, his stance. And his stance, his continued stance, his persistence in saying he's innocent and that God has done this, tend to destroy the fear of God. And if Job had sinned and was adamant that he was innocent and that God was in the wrong and that God owed him and all of that. Of course, that would destroy your worshipful stance before God. So Eliphaz is not wrong. He's just applying it to the wrong person. He's wrong in the sense that it's the wrong application. In 1 through 6, he says, your own mouth condemns you. So so we'll start with verse 2, read 2 through 6. Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. So Eliphaz is basically saying, I'm not your enemy here. I'm trying to help you out. You're the one who has put yourself in this situation, and you're making it worse by not admitting that you've sinned. And that's why things continue to be hard for you. It's not me. I'm just, coming to try to help you here. It's your own mouth. The words out of your own mouth have condemned you. And so there's two things that Job's doing wrong in Eliphaz's estimation. He's got that stubborn refusal to admit that he's sinned and that his sin has brought this punishment on himself. And then the second thing is that he's irrationally lashing out at God. And the reason that his lashing out at God is irrational is because, in Eliphaz's estimation, Job wrongly believes that Job is not the one to blame for his predicament. And so he's trying to point these out, and he's making a reference back to Job's own words, and we'll look at some of those in a minute. In verses 2 and 3, Eliphaz asked Job, I think rhetorically, I don't think he's expecting Job to interrupt him and answer, but rhetorically asked Job if, and I believe he's talking about Job here, if Job should continue to answer with windy knowledge. He's saying to Job, the things you've been saying are windy, vain, fleeting. Why do you keep answering like that? You should stop that, right? Because that's not wise to continue to do that. And I do think, he's trying to enlighten Job. He's not just throwing accusations at him. We've seen this before where Job's words have been characterized as insubstantial or windy. In Job 6:26, Job said of his own words, do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? He's saying to his friends, you're trying to reprove the words I'm saying, but I'm a despairing man and my speech is insubstantial. So why are you dealing with my words? And then this is ironic because I believe it's this statement of Job characterizing his own words as wind that gets picked up by Bildad in chapter 8. And Bildad, he's the rough one, right? How long will you say these things and the words of your mouth be a great wind? So he totally misunderstands what Job said there and uses it back against him. And now here Eliphaz is also saying you're answering with windy knowledge. And he goes on to say, you fill your belly with the east wind. And the east wind is associated with destruction and destructiveness. There's 4 passages about that we want to look at here. So Genesis 41:6 is the first one. And I'm not even sure they're on the outline, so they're not in the list of passages. Genesis 41:6, Joseph's dream, and behold, after them sprouted, or Pharaoh's dream rather, and behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. So the east wind is destructive here. Jonah 4:8, when the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint. And he asked that he might die and said, it is better for me to die than to live. So, destruction, destructive. Jeremiah 18:17, like the east wind, I will scatter them before the enemy. I will show them my back, not my face, in the day of their calamity. So the east wind is bad. It's associated with bad stuff. Isaiah 27:8, Measure by measure, by exile you contended with them. God, or he removed them with his fierce breath in the day of the east wind. So when Eliphaz says of Job's words in verses 2 and 3 that he's saying things that sound like the east wind, verse 2, should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? He's setting himself up. He's setting up the speech by saying what you're saying is destructive. His next point is specifically it's destructive of your own standing before God, of your own piety and relationship with God, your fear of the Lord. It's making you appear foolish. Your own words, your own thoughts. So that's what he's saying there. And then in 4 and 5, he says, but you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Says a couple of things here. The first one about doing away with the fear of God. In Eliphaz's first speech in Job 4:6, he began that speech with an observation of Job's relationship to the fear of God. And he's beginning this speech the same way, right? Another reference to the fear of God. In Job 4:6, Eliphaz said, is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? So Eliphaz is consistent. This is the thing that he's concerned about. He's concerned about Job's relationship with God, at least his outward appearance, to be cynical, right? To be cynical, what you might say that Eliphaz is concerned with the outward appearance of piety, okay, and righteousness. And Job doesn't look very pious right now. He doesn't look very righteous. And he's the one who's wallowing in his own self-pity, and he's holding on to this idea that he's innocent. It's not his fault, and God owes him an explanation. And this is making him bitter and frustrated, and it's ruining his, at least to outward appearances, his relationship with God. And so Eliphaz, I think this is the thing he's concerned about in his speeches, is because he brings it up at the beginning of the first one, he brings it up here, and in the first one again, it's not your fear of God, your confidence, and the integrity of your ways, your hope. And he was encouraging Job then to count on his fear of God, which Job does actually appear to do in his speeches. In 13:16, Job says, this will be my salvation, that the godless shall not come before him. He's saying, I'm going to speak to God, I'm going to stand before him, and my salvation is that only righteous person can stand before him, and I'm righteous. So he's the fear of the Lord is his confidence. But Eliphaz is saying to him at this point, don't be so hasty to trust in your fear of the Lord, because it's eroding. You're eroding it yourself. You need to fix that, right? In verse 5, he says, you choose the tongue of the crafty. It's an interesting word for crafty. It's in Job 5, Eliphaz was speaking there, and it's his first speech in the book. And he had argued that God frustrates the crafty to hinder their success. And now he's saying that Job picks the tongue of the crafty, the one that God frustrates. So Job 5:12 through 13. Speaking of God, Eliphaz says, he frustrates the devices of the crafty. Same word there for that's used in 15. He frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. He catches the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to a quick end. Maybe we'll look at this a little bit more in a second, or maybe we can look at it right now. It's not on the outline, but this is the only passage from the book of Job that is quoted in the New Testament. Verse 13 is quoted in the book of James, I believe. No, First Corinthians. Let's see. Let me find it. Somebody who's already got it up on the screen can tell me where it is. I think
First
it's
Corinthians 3:19.
1 Corinthians 3:19. Okay, thanks.
You're
Let's
welcome.
look at that. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So 1 Corinthians 3:19. So it's really interesting, right? There are no direct quotes of Job in the entire New Testament except for this one verse, verse 13 of chapter 5. Eliphaz speaking, not Job. Okay, one of the bad guys speaking, right? He's got wrong theology, he's got a bad worldview, and this is what gets quoted. And you can see it there, right? It's the wisdom of this world is folly with God, for it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. So the first one, he catches the wise in their craftiness, is from Job 5:13. And I think this is really interesting. Why do you think I think that's interesting? Anybody have any idea? I mean, if you were going to quote the book of Job, wouldn't you want to quote God or Job?
Yes.
Why would you quote Eliphaz?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because Eliphaz is saying some things that are actually true, but they're based on a wrong worldview.
Yes, there's that. If you extract the words out of the worldview and put them in the biblical worldview, he's right.
Mhm.
Okay? He's correct. And I think that's the problem with falsehood, right? The falsehood is often looks like the truth, and because you can take what people say and put it into a biblical worldview, because we all use the same words, and you can take what people say and put it in the biblical worldview and then accept it as true. But then it doesn't really work because that's not what they meant, and then you buy into their worldview, right? When you accept their words. So lots of commentators, I think, are stumbled by Paul using Eliphaz. The logic goes like this. The logic they use, these commentators, goes like this. Eliphaz must be speaking good biblical truth. And so we can't read Job with the supposition that we're to reject that they didn't say anything true about God. We have to go through each speech and go, oh yeah, well, this statement is true, but that statement's not, and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff as we go through there, because Paul apparently thinks Eliphaz spoke the truth, and Paul's writing under inspiration, and so so the Spirit then is telling us that Eliphaz is speaking the truth, and that it would be illogical to think that Paul is inspired to use this phrase, quoting Eliphaz, but Eliphaz wasn't inspired, right? That would be illogical. So I think a lot of commentators are misled. They stumble over this. I think it's really important to start the book of Job, as I said, with God's evaluation of the various speakers. And if you start there, you go, well, no, he didn't say anything right about God. It might sound right, but it's not right because it's in the wrong worldview. And so then that brings up the question then again, why is Paul quoting him? Because you can't, so.
I guess one thing that it just occurred to me too is that, and I don't know if this is what is Paul is being very clever here, but who is this that is speaking here, and he catches the wise in their craftiness?
Yeah, that's Eliphaz.
Eliphaz. that he ends up those words end up getting turned back on him because he's the wise. He's portraying himself as wise, right?
Yep.
So Paul is that like double demonstrating that in that it is true on its face. The Lord catches the wise in their craftiness, and he gets the crafty wise man saying it to prove it.
Right. I think that is the point. I think that it's ironic.
Yeah.
I think Paul and the Holy Spirit have a sense of humor here where they're just snickering as they write these lines and going, and here's a great example. Here's a wise man who got caught with his words. And what's he accusing Job of? Or maybe accusing is too strong for Eliphaz, but the thing he's saying about Job is, Job, your own words are getting you into trouble. But it's actually Eliphaz's words that get him into trouble. And so I think Paul quotes Eliphaz knowing, and the Holy Spirit knowing, that astute readers of First Corinthians will realize or find out that's coming from Book of Job. That's Eliphaz. And God said, you never spoke a right word about me. Even though you claim to be wise, you're really a fool. Right. And 1 Corinthians 3:18, let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks that he is wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is folly with God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, for they are futile. Right. So he's using the quote and he's saying, here's an illustration of what I mean. Just remember who said this. And there's your illustration. So I think that the commentators that get misled they start with the faulty premise that they think they know, they exclude irony from the things that Paul might be using. So,
Yeah. They assume he's just taking it as okay, this guy said a good thing, so I'm going to quote him because he said a good thing.
right. But he's actually teaching,
Yeah.
right? He's teaching something. So it's a really interesting use of the Old Testament, real, and it's so we're not to go, oh, Paul quoted it. It must be right. I mean, it must be Eliphaz is speaking the truth here. His words are true in a biblical context, but in his context, they're not true, and he does get rebuked for them. So
Very
Is
good.
that, I mean, that's almost, you could say it's not the theme, but it's one of the themes of the whole book of Job is God catching the wise in their craftiness. Like ultimately that's how it ends.
yeah, that's a good observation there. Good observation. So the word there, crafty, in the verse Job 5 or Job 15:5, you choose the tongue of the crafty, Eliphaz says to Job. And in Job 5:12, God frustrates the devices of the crafty. Eliphaz saying both of those. That word is arum. I think it's pronounced arum. It might be arum. I'm not sure. It's also used in Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more arum than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made, more crafty. He said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? This is a loaded word, right? So the crafty get destroyed by God. And that's what the Genesis passage implies. That's what Eliphaz actually says. And that's what Paul says and what God demonstrates in regard to Eliphaz. So very interesting thing going on there. So in 15:6, back to Job 15:6, Eliphaz says about Job, your own mouth condemns you. And he's going to say at the end of that verse, it's your own lips that are testifying against you. And what he's I think there's some background things that Job said earlier. that Eliphaz is referring to. Job says about himself, though I am in the right, my own mouth would condemn me. And here's that root idea, right? It's your own mouth that's condemning you. Job was saying it that was Job 9:20, and Job was saying that in Job 9 because he was contemplating standing before God. He wanted to remember it was that section where there were 6 or 7 different ways that Job could possibly solve the problem, or the problem could possibly be solved. And one of them was a court appearance where he got to speak his case before God. And he's basically saying, his knowledge is so great, it's infinite, and I don't know the big picture. And man, whatever I say is just going to condemn me, right? And even though I'm in the right, I don't really know what's going on, so I can't really speak about it. So God gives me this day in court, and he says, give me your best argument. It's just not going to work. And that's what he's thinking there. In Job 10:2, he says to his friends, do not condemn me. In Job 13:19, he says, who is there who will contend with me? For then I will be silent and die. And so Eliphaz says, it's you're contending with you. You are the one who's fighting against you, So Eliphaz then makes the point, or his point is, he's not the one condemning Job. He's not attacking Job. He's not accusing Job. He's saying, Job, you did all this stuff. You're the one who keeps doing this. You're the one, not me. Your words get you into trouble. Your attitude gets you into trouble. It's not trouble from outside. It's you. I'm just trying to help you by pointing that out. So then Job 15:7-16, or Eliphaz is responding to, I think, Job's own words in chapter 12 and 13. Chapter 12, chapter 12, 2 and 3, Job says, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? And in Job 13:2, the same speech, Job said, well, I also know. I'm not inferior to you. This is what Eliphaz says in chapter 15:7-10. And I think this is a response. Are you the first man who was born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. So Eliphaz is saying, you think you have wisdom, and that you're basically the sole repository of wisdom here on earth. And because you are rejecting all of our wisdom, and we're older than you and have more wisdom than you, and collectively we've got, several 150 years, 180 years of wisdom, and there's nothing that we don't understand about this that you understand. So this is the kind of the counter, and he's criticizing Job for ignoring the teachings of the elders. And this has come up before. This is one of the sticking points on the friends. They're like, you're rejecting us, and so you're rejecting all the wisdom of the ages and the thing everybody who's wise knows. And Eliphaz even equates it with, the words of God. This is a foreshadowing. We have the same thing happening in Matthew 15, 1 and 2. And let's look at that. Matthew 15, 1 and 2. Then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat. So this is a criticism of Jesus as the teacher, right? Teacher, your students are out of control. They're not doing what all the elders say should be done. why would you reject the wisdom of all of the ages and the sages, right? So the Pharisees are attacking or criticizing Jesus and his disciples there for what Job is being criticized for. Job is being criticized for rejecting the traditions of the elders, right? And so Job is in this way a foreshadow of Christ, who is also criticized and ultimately rejected for not adhering to the traditions of the elders. And Job gets lots of flack about that. And then we've already read 15:10. That was both the gray-haired and the aged are among us older than your fathers. So Eliphaz and his friends are apparently older than Job. We've made this observation before. We also already observed that Eliphaz's view is that wisdom and age go together. The older you are, the more wise you are, or at least potentially, I guess. But actually, in Eliphaz's view, it's somebody who's been the people in his society, his worldview, his social circles. The older people are the wiser people, and that's the view of all the older people. And of course, all the older people would want to believe that, right? Older people are smarter than younger people. But Job's already countered that, right? In Job 12 and 13, Job said, it sounded like he was agreeing with them. Wisdom is with the aged, right? Eliphaz has just said, the gray-haired and the aged are among us. Not with you, Job, but with us, among us. And Job says, wisdom is with the aged, and understanding and length of days. And then he says, with God are wisdom and might. He has counsel and understanding. His thought there is that, God in Daniel 7, probably other places too, is called the Ancient of Days, right? The Ancient of Days. Wisdom is with the aged, and understanding and length of days. With God, who is the Ancient of Days, are wisdom and might. He's got more days than you, Eliphaz. So Eliphaz didn't pick up on that. He's just reasserting that Job is rejecting wisdom. And the reason we know that it's wisdom is because everybody around you who's telling it to you, Job, are all older than you. And so, and then I think we're not going to finish tonight. So let me stop at this point and see if anybody has anything you want to say before we close tonight.
I really like the last point you made about the last part you read, because I've never read it that way. And now I would read it where Job is saying, yeah, wisdom is with the aged, and understanding in the length of days. With God are wisdom and might. He has counsel and understanding.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that there's like a space there, like it's a new thought in the translation or in the ESV, but I think it's not a new thought. I think he's just carrying on, because you got two choices, right? When you read it for Job, he's either being sarcastic. Yeah, you're right. Wisdom is with the aged, sarcastic, or he's saying you are right, but you don't know who the aged are.
Right.
So, all right. Any other thoughts before I turn off the recording?
No.
Okay. All right.